This is a reading from the book entitled Catholic Prophecy, The Coming Chastisement by Yves Dupont. The book was written in the 1970s, and I think it would be interesting to see what was predicted even back then. Catholic Prophecy, The Coming Chastisement, Precisions on the Great Disaster. These precisions run from paragraph 12 to 75. Since they are repeated in many different prophecies, it is not possible to treat them separately. Each of the paragraphs, therefore, may contain one or more of these precisions. General events. Not a two-camp war, but a multi-sided war. Not a war only, but a worldwide revolution as well. Not simply a man-made holocaust, but also a God-sent chastisement, accompanied by cosmic disturbances, to last about 4 years. Particular events. The whole world will be involved in the fighting. A unique feature is the internal disintegration of the Western democracies and the invasion of Western Europe by Arab forces. The roles of the USA and the USSR are not clear in the beginning. The USA may be involved in the Far East or at home, or both. The USSR may want to keep out of the fray at first, while abetting the Arab world, or may be involved in Siberia. Civil wars rage in Western Europe. The Church is persecuted. The Pope leaves Rome and dies in exile. An anti-pope is installed in Rome. The Catholic Church is split, leaderless, and completely disorganized. Communism is victorious. The Mohammedans invade Europe and commit innumerable atrocities. In the West, however, Christians rally around an unexpected leader, an army officer of royal blood, but their chances seem very slim. The natural disturbances begin: floods, droughts, famines. A comet approaches the earth. Whole mountains split open. Huge tidal waves swallow up low-lying lands. Stones fall from the sky. A deadly fog or gas poisons the atmosphere. A prolonged darkness envelops the earth. 2/3 or 3/4 of the human race is wiped out. The powers of evil are shattered. The Christian prince leads his growing army to battle and wins victory upon victory. In West Germany, he crushes a Germano-Russian army. Communism collapses everywhere. The Mohammedans are thrown back to the sea. The war is carried to Africa and the Middle East, where the Arab powers dealt a deadly blow. At this stage, if not earlier, U.S. troops come to the assistance of Western Europe. Russia and China are converted to Catholicism, as also the Mohammedans. All non-Catholics return to Mother Church. A holy pope is elected. He shows great firmness, and he restores all the former disciplines in the Church. All the nations of Western Europe unite and form a new Roman Empire, and accept as their emperor the great Christian prince, chosen by God, who works hand in hand with the holy pope. The triumph of the Catholic Church is universal. The whole world enjoys a period of complete peace and unprecedented prosperity in mutual love and respect among people and nations. This great peace will last until the coming of Antichrist. Catholic Prophecy, The Coming Chastisement by Yves Dupont. And they did not understand until the flood came and swept them all away. Matthew chapter 24. Verse 39. Publisher's Preface. A number of reasons exist for publishing this volume of prophecies and commentaries. First of all, one hears much at the present time about our being in the great apostasy foretold by St. Paul, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. The author's research indicates this is most likely not the case. Secondly, one also hears much about being in the time of the Antichrist. The prophecies of this book, however, indicate that a number of events have yet to be fulfilled before his coming. This is not to deny the time of Antichrist could indeed be close. Thirdly, if future events develop according to these prophecies, it will be just one more proof the Catholic Church is the one true Church of God. Fourthly, if these prophecies are true, then the world, each and every one of us, needs more than ever to repent, pray, and do penance. So this book is implicitly a call to spiritual warfare against the forces of hell let loose on earth. Fifthly, historic developments do in fact indicate we have already entered the period foretold by these prophecies. And finally, as the author mentions, there are many, many other prophecies which substantiate those in this book. Thus, the number, content, and reinforcement of these predictions is such to demand injustice, so to speak, that they be disseminated. For these prophecies help us to understand what is wrong with our world. It has rejected Christ and his divine counsels, and has adopted instead erroneous human counsels suggested by the very enemies of Christ. And these prophecies help us know what we can do about our times, pray and consecrate our lives to God, and prepare ourselves for the coming events. May this little volume reach and enlighten many people, and may it help fulfill the will of our Lord Jesus Christ in the work of saving souls. Thomas A. Nelson, 1970. About the author. Yves Dupont was born in 1922 at Paris, where he spent his childhood. He was educated at the Collège de Royan on the southwest coast of France, north of Bordeaux. In early 1941, shortly after the outbreak of war, he joined the French colonial army in North Africa, where he became a practicing Catholic, and later fought alongside the American army there in Italy, and in France and Germany. During the bitter winter of 1944, he received the Croix de Guerre in Alsace. After the war, he lived several years in Paris, and then left France for Australia, where he currently lives with his wife of English birth and their 4 children. In 1938, at the age of 16, the author read his first book of prophecy. It predicted the death of Pope Pius XI for the spring of 1939. When this prediction came about, he decided to investigate the prophecy more thoroughly. 2 years later, at the age of 18, and while still in school, he wrote a prophetical summary. That summary stated, "The war will soon break out. France will be defeated. The Nazis will pitch their tents on the banks of the River Loire." The master on duty that evening found him writing this and read it, and commented, "My young fellow, don't waste your time with such nonsense." The French people, Mr. Dupont reminisces, from the Prime Minister down to the school janitor, were supremely confident that the powerful French army would dispose of Hitler within a few months if he were rash enough to go to war. But the war broke out 6 months later. After a few months of the phony war, the War of Skirmishes, the Nazis struck in May 1940, and the French army was defeated in 3 weeks, completely destroyed in 6. Not only did the Nazis reach the Loire, they even went farther down to the Garonne. 4 long years of occupation had begun. After the war, I resumed my prophetical studies. By then I was aware that the prophecies have a far deeper significance than a mere listing of events to come. I could see, too, that the post-war political scene showed the same errors and faults which have been responsible for the rise of Hitler. Les derniers jours des derniers temps, the last days of the last times. The author's first book on prophecy was published in Paris in 1959, and the second one, a pro manuscripto book, in Belgium in 1962. At Melbourne, in 1962, he also began publishing World Trends, a Catholic quarterly of comments on events in the church and in the political and social arenas. His popular article, Garabandal, has been republished from the World Trends by Tan Books and Publishers. My observations of the proceedings of Vatican II prompted me to express fears and misgivings for the future of the Church. Rereading those early issues of World Trends, one is profoundly impressed by the accuracy of Mr. Dupont's analyses at that time. Indeed, his prognostications of 1962 to 1965 are as fresh and vigorous today as they were then. At a time of surface calm in the Church, many of his readers were incredulous at his predictions of trouble and dissension soon to come. He believes the fears of that time have now been vindicated, and the Church is split. He believes also that we are entering the period predicted by the prophecies in this book. In presenting the present volume, Mr. Dupont states that he has enough material for 4 such books. The response this one receives will determine his authoring others. Introduction. Private and public prophecies. Private revelations, that is, apparitions and locutions with or without prophecies, are those which have been recorded since the days of Christ. Revelations which were recorded up to the days of Christ are known as public, biblical, or scriptural revelations. Private revelations do not belong to the deposit of faith, and as such are not binding upon our faith. Nevertheless, it is an indisputable fact that Almighty God often speaks to his servants in an unmistakable manner. Many Catholic devotions are based solely on private revelations. The Rosary, the Sacred Heart, and the Scapular are cases in point. More recently, devotion to Our Lady of Fatima was accepted and encouraged by the Church. There is ample evidence that revelations have taken place throughout the centuries, right up to the present time, and it is likely that some are taking place at this very moment. The importance of prophecies. St. Paul said, "Aim at charity, yet strive after the spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. He who prophesies speaks to men for edification and encouragement and consolation. Now I should like you all to speak in tongues, but still more to prophesy, for he who prophesies is greater than he who speaks in tongues." 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verses 1, 3, and 5. Indeed, prophecies are for our edification. They cast a light on many problems. They warn us against errors. They prepare us for dangers to come, and they are a manifestation of the power of God. At the same time, they are an encouragement and a consolation. The current crisis in the Church and in the world was predicted long ago, but the final victory of the Christian forces is also predicted. This is an encouragement and a consolation. The Reformation in the 16th century, the so-called Age of Enlightenment in the 18th, and the rise of democracy in the 20th were all predicted and called deadly errors. The Enlightenment, as a matter of fact, was described as the beginning of an age of spiritual darkness. This is self-evident today. The rise of popular power, sometimes called the Fourth Estate in the Prophecies, was defined as being against the natural order willed by God, and it was said that it would end in chaos, anarchy, and bloodshed. We are fast approaching that stage. There is now throughout the world a general revolt against authority that leaves little doubt as to the outcome. Thus, what the vast majority of people today regard as their most cherished values was denounced as errors. It is quite possible that many of us have been so influenced by modern ideas that we may find it difficult to accept what these prophecies say. But this is another question, for the prophecies do not ask for our assent. They simply warn us and describe events which, once they have come to pass, will force our assent. Yes, we are free to reject the prophecies, but we do not possess the right to do so. Freedom is not a right, it is a duty, or more accurately, it is a faculty of our makeup, which implies a duty. We possess the faculty to choose between good and evil, between truth and error, between God and Satan, a privilege which the lower animals do not possess. But our duty is to choose God, truth, and goodness. The modern concept of freedom is a right, is a distortion of Catholic truth. The basis of this study. I have studied several hundred of these prophecies over the last 30 years or so. I have written books about them. These books in turn have resulted in my getting into touch with people whom I would never have heard from otherwise. Thus, I came to receive the unpublished manuscripts of a saintly French priest who died shortly afterwards. These comprised well over 1,000 pages and contained unprocurable material of immense value, together with a scholarly analysis of private prophecies. This holy man was a country priest. I can imagine him in his little village for many years on end, spending every evening of his solitary life assembling and analyzing this unique monument of prophetical writings, one of the few typewritten copies of which he finally sent to me. The material I now possess is indeed monumental, and it would take many books to include it all, but this would not in any case be desirable, as many of these prophecies are repetitive. This is so because God has multiplied his warnings throughout the centuries, in many different countries, to innumerable people, in order that we might all know of the terrible events which are to take place in this, our apocalyptic age. It is on the basis of this material that I invite you to read this little book. Prophecies and Commentaries. 1. Teresa Newman, 1936. The furies of hell are now set loose. Divine punishment is inevitable. 2. St. Columba, 6th century. Hearken, Hearken to what will happen in the latter days of the world. There will be great wars, unjust laws will be enacted, the church will be despoiled of her property, people will read and write a great deal, but charity and humility will be laughed to scorn, and the common people will believe in false ideas. 3. Elizabeth Canori Mora, 19th century. Woe to the religious who does not observe his rule. I say the same to the secular clergy and to all people in the world who give themselves to a life of pleasure and who believe in the false maxims of modern ideas. 4. Berthet Petit, 1943. The human race will have to go through a great storm that will sharpen divisions among men and reduce their plans to ashes. 5. Brother Louis Rocco, 19th century. A great king will arise after a period of terrible wars and persecutions. 6. Saint Methodius, 4th century. A day will come when the enemies of Christ will boast of having conquered the whole world. They will say, Christians cannot escape now, but a great king will arise to fight the enemies of God. He will defeat them, and peace will be given to the world, and the church will be freed from her anxieties. 7. Pius IX, 19th century. There will be a great prodigy which will fill the world with awe, but this prodigy will be preceded by the triumph of a revolution during which the church will go through ordeals that are beyond description. 8. Melanie Calvat, the seeress of La Salette, 19th century. After a frightful war, a great king will arise, and his reign will be marked by a wonderful peace and a great religious revival. 9. Saint Cataldus, 5th century. The great king will wage war until the age of 40. He will assemble great armies and hurl back the tyrants out of his empire. 10. Father Souffron, 19th century. During the reign of the great king, the noblest virtues will be practiced throughout the world, and the land will yield abundant crops. 11. Rudolf Gechner, 17th century. A great prince of the north with a most powerful army will traverse all Europe. Excuse me. A great prince of the north with a most powerful army will traverse all Europe, uproot all the republics, and defeat all the rebels. His sword, moved by divine power, will most valiantly defend the Church of Jesus Christ. Comment. There are but a few excerpts given to you as an introduction. Many more need to be read and carefully collated before the general outline of events can take form, and before many seemingly indifferent phrases can assume a deeper significance. I did that job many years ago, so I can, even now, add a few useful comments to the above passages. St. Columba's prophecy has already come to pass. We have had 2 world wars so far. Unjust laws have been enacted in every country. The church lost her property in 1870. The development of the printing press has caused people to read and write a great deal, something which was impossible for anyone but a saint to visualize in the 6th century. Charity and humility are now scoffed at, and people believe in the false human messianism which arose during the Renaissance in intellectual quarters, and which has spread among the common people from the 18th century onwards. But more of this later. We shall soon see what this false human messianism involves in practical terms. We shall see also how and why it must be regarded as the cause of the coming disaster. Thus, this little phrase, jotted down as if in passing by St. Columba, will assume a deeper significance. Elizabeth Canori Mora, too, alludes to the false maxims of modern ideas. Many other private prophecies do so, and some in great detail. We shall see some of them. Berthet Petit announces the great disaster that will cause the almost total collapse of modern civilization. Brother Louis Rocco foretells the great king who is to rule over Europe and extend his moral influence throughout the whole world during the period of peace which will follow the great disaster. Saint Methodius was one of the earliest prophets of the Christian era to foresee the victory of communism. He did not name communism, but correlations with other prophecies will make this clear. Many other prophecies say that the victory of communism will seem so certain that they, the communists, will throw up their caps and shout about their triumph. At that very moment, a cosmic phenomenon will take place and help the designs of the future king's small army. It is only later that his army will grow to be very large. This most Christian prince will reduce the communists to a rabble. Pius IX alludes to the same episode, although in different terms. He sees the cosmic phenomenon that will follow the triumph of the communist revolution. Melanie Calvat also foretells the rise of the great king, the wonderful period of peace, and the religious revival which is to follow. So does Saint Cataldus in the 5th century, and again Father Souffrand in the 19th century. Rudolf Geckner confirms all the above predictions and adds that this king will uproot all republics. Countless prophecies develop this point, saying that this king will herald a new social and political order in which authority will be hierarchical and descending, instead of popular and ascending. This is an aspect of political philosophy to which we shall have occasion to return.